Our lesson this week is brought to you by a tree. A beautiful big oak tree that has shaded part of the local cemetery near my house for probably 100 years. It's a tall, broad oak that I've walked past maybe 1,000 times. And though I could find no pictures of it on my phone, I know that I have spent time admiring its foliage and its birds that love to nest or hang out in it. And now the tree has reached its final stage of life. When I noticed that the tree had fallen last week, I walked across around the flush-mounted grave markers to where it lay. It had split in two between its twin trunks, and the rotted wood exposed at the base told the story of why it fell. Yet as I followed the trunks of the tree, each at least 2 feet in diameter, toward what had been the crown, I saw strong limbs covered in leathery leaves and a profusion of acorns. Now I offered a little blessing to the tree, and as I did, I noticed that I found myself identifying more with the acorns than the aged trunk of the tree. I want to think of myself as shiny and new and full of promise, even though I have to admit that I'm closer to the end of my life than the beginning. Even so, I was moved by the fact that this elder tree, whose health had been failing clearly for some time, still managed to put out seeds for the future. And while those acorns certainly would not be allowed to make saplings in the manicured lawn, they would certainly feed some hungry squirrels, be part of mulch for other plants, or, if carried away, perhaps take root in some new location. It occurred to me that this tree was certainly doing its part to be a good ancestor for future generations. So what does it mean to be a good ancestor? I first encountered that phrase when working through the book Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saad. It's a wonderful guide for examining and transforming our personal racial conditioning. For Saad, being a good ancestor is about being willing to be a little uncomfortable as we make the internal and external changes, as we turn too many pages. Oh, there we go. As we make the internal and external changes now that will lay a good foundation for the next generations. It means if we want to see a peaceful and equitable world in the future, continually examining our own biases and the why am I having such trouble reading this morning? Let's try again. Continually examining our own biases and the inequities of the world we live in, and doing something about them. Now, my mother passed on her love of ice cream to me, but she also left me some important wisdom. She taught me to see the best in people and to question my preconceptions. I remember her telling me that she was less prejudiced than her parents were, her parents who were wonderful people, and she was proud of the fact that her children were less prejudiced than she was. And I see that same progression in my family. My children have perspectives and life's work that addresses the biases and inequities in their world. And they've pushed me to recognize and address my own limited perspectives and speak up for marginalized people so that I can be a good ancestor for them and future generations. My grandparents were good ancestors too in their own way, offering a legacy of love and a strong sense of home. And Lenore's story tells of family legacy as well, stories passed down through time. And perhaps our greatest gift to our family lineage is to add to that legacy our insights and the healings of past experiences, maybe past traumas, so that those who come after us receive good tools for their lives. Saad relates the story of being asked what a post-racist planet would look like, and realized she had no idea. She needed to do some thinking about what it was that she wanted for her descendants. When I imagine my great nibblings futures, nibblings being the gender-neutral term for nieces and nephews, and it's the best term in the world. When I imagine my great nibblings futures, say 50 years from now, when my youngest great niece will be 55, I hope that it is a world where all people have what they need to thrive: food and shelter, social bonds, education, a world of peace and equity for all people, a world where people work together to avert climate disaster, or maybe to have averted it, I don't know, in harmony with nature. I find it almost unbearable to think about what could happen. Exactly how the growing climate crisis, increased violence and rampant polarization in societies around the globe could potentially affect the children that I know and love today. It's huge, isn't it? Overwhelming. I'm sorry to even bring it up here, because I'm sure that it hurts many of you as much as it hurts me. And yet, we need to be aware that that's a possibility. And the lack of urgent response to crises that face us is exacerbated by systems of oppression and marginalization that put the controls in the hands of those who are the least impacted, or think they will be the least impacted because of their power and wealth. It's easy for those of us not in power to feel hopeless and to assuage our fears with the thought that scientists or engineers or politicians will figure something out, right? A solution before the worst happens. It's easier to keep our eyes on the now rather than taking a serious stock of the future. In his book, The Good Ancestor, by Roman Krznaric, he stresses the importance of cultivating long-term thinking to maintain awareness of how we will be judged by future generations, he says, and whether we will leave a legacy that benefits or cripples them. In other words, to see ourselves as good ancestors and act accordingly to address the climate crisis in particular. Krznaric uses an analogy for the divided minds of humans. He calls one part the marshmallow brain, squishy, and it's focused on short-term desires. Modern society provides a million rewards for our marshmallow brains, like social media apps and the ubiquitous buy now button. And he talks about having maybe a buy next week button, so you've got time to think about it. Next year, exactly. Do I really need that? And it's not just weakness that causes people to go back for instant rewards. It's well-researched, well-orchestrated, well-advertised strategy of our capitalist culture. It's part of what perpetuates people's sense of separation from one another, and our sense of helplessness. On the other hand, there's the acorn brain, the one that seems to be unique to humans, the one that allows us to envision possibilities in a distant future and to stay focused on long-term goals. The acorn brain that brings us infrastructure projects that are built to last and serve for generations, insights on rewilding land so that it will stay healthy for generations to come, and the Voyager spacecrafts that have been flying for 46 years now and are still sending back data. They're 14 billion miles from Earth. And they're still sending back data, and they're just going to keep going. It's amazing. It's the acorn brain that allows us, if we let it, to imagine the world we want for our descendants and envision how to take actions now for the benefit of future generations. To do that, we need to really connect to those future generations, to really think of them. And there are many different approaches and practices to doing that. Krishnarik lists several. But since tomorrow is Indigenous Peoples Day, I will lift up the Indigenous concept of planning for the 7th generation. As Oren Lyons, a faith keeper of the Turtle Clan, Onondaga Nation, says, tribal leaders make decisions based on this principle. He says, we are looking ahead to make sure every decision that we make relates to the welfare and well-being of the 7th generation to come. We consider, will this be to the benefit of the 7th generation? And 7th generation thinking means caring for the environment and managing the use of natural resources. So John Burrows, a member of the Chippewas of the Nawash First Nation in Ontario, says living within our limits demonstrates affection for our children. It also shows our respect and love for the earth. This way of thinking reminds me of UU's 7th principle, which is restated in the proposed Article 2 language as, we honor the interdependent web of all existence. We covenant to cherish Earth and all beings by creating and nurturing relationships of care and respect. With humility and reverence, we acknowledge our place in the great web of life, and we work to repair harm and damaged relationships. Now, what underlies this statement and all the UU principles is love, our deepest held value and our lived connection to each other and our earth. It is also at the root of Roman Krznarik's and Layla Saad's work. It's about extending that love to heal the injuries of the past, to care for ourselves and all beings in the present, and to do the best we can for generations in the future beyond even our imaginings. So I ask you to take time regularly to rise above the relentless news cycles and phone apps and unyielding calls for our attention in exchange for fleeting rewards. To look up and around, to fall in love again with the world around you, as Vicky did in the Olympics. And to fall in love, not only with the generations we know, the people we know, but the generations to come who will struggle with their own issues, their own set of circumstances. And consider, how can we help them? How can we help them live a better life that may be reflecting on our own lingering biases and fears? It may be doing something to build community or assist nature in some way. We can't do it all. We can't do it all. But we can do something. And if we all do something, whatever that may be that speaks to you, then that's the best we can do. That's the best we can hope for. Layla Saad says, the good ancestor understands the both and of their limitations as human beings and the infiniteness of the legacy that they can create and leave for others if they choose to focus on what they can do consistently with depth, rigor, and even joy. Depth, vigor, and even joy. And let's put love in there. I believe that joy and rest are necessary parts of the equation. We are in this for the long haul, folks, so let's keep pushing while consistently caring for ourselves and our loved ones. As we practice, we will find in the world we envision for our children's children's children that that world is in us. Like the oak bears acorns, we bear the seeds now of that future. May we plant them and nourish them well, that our descendants may have the tools they need to live a good life. May we maintain hope that our efforts to be good ancestors will also bear abundant fruit for the generations to come. May it be so. Amen.